So you've definitely heard the name Confucius, right? But what do we really know about him, beyond a few wise-sounding quotes? It turns out this was a man, a philosopher, a political thinker, whose ideas would go on to literally shape a civilization for more than 2,000 years. Okay, let's get into it.
To really get Confucius, you first have to understand the one huge question that drove his entire life. And it's a question that feels, well, pretty relevant today. How do you fix a broken society? For him, this wasn't some academic puzzle. This was the reality he woke up to every single day.
You see, Confucius was born into a time of total chaos. The central government had basically collapsed. China had shattered into all these little states that were constantly at war with each other. Old values were crumbling, nobody trusted anybody, and it really felt like society was tearing itself apart at the seams. That was the problem he set out to solve.
And right into the middle of all that mess steps this one guy, who believes he has a blueprint to put it all back together. And his big idea wasn't to fix it with armies and force, but to fix it with, well, with philosophy.
The man we know as Confucius was born in 551 BCE, and his name was actually Kong Q. And even though he'd later be called Master Kong, his beginnings were pretty tough. His dad died when he was just 3, and his mom raised him in poverty. But he dedicated himself to studying. And through that, he developed this incredibly powerful vision for the world. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. Confucius never said he was inventing anything new. He didn't see himself as some prophet with a brand new message. He saw himself as a transmitter. His mission, as he saw it, was to find the lost moral wisdom from an earlier, golden age he admired, a time of peace and order, and bring it back to the present.
So, what was this ancient wisdom he was so determined to revive? Well, it was essentially a detailed ethical blueprint for how everybody, from individuals and families all the way up to rulers, should behave to create a just and stable society.
At the very heart of it all is a concept called ren. Now, it's often translated as benevolence or humaneness, but it's so much deeper than that. Ren is really about empathy and a deep understanding of our responsibilities to other people. It's about treating everyone with genuine kindness, sincerity, and generosity.
And if Ren is the goal, then E is the moral compass that points you there. E, or righteousness, is that ability to just know what the right thing to do is in any situation, not because it's good for you, but just because it is the right thing. It's all about acting for the greater good, not for your own personal gain.
And then you have Li. This is where the rubber meets the road. Li covers all the rites, the ceremonies, the rules of etiquette that guide how we interact with each other. You can think of it as the playbook for society. It's how you take those inner virtues, your Ren and Yi, and actually put them into practice in the real world.
And of course, his most famous teaching pretty much boils this all down. We all know the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, Confucius taught what's often called the silver rule, and it's just as powerful. It's a simple, brilliant guide for pretty much every human interaction.
And here's a fascinating little detail. Confucius himself never actually wrote any of this down. Not in a book, anyway. All of his teachings and sayings were remembered and collected by his students after he died. They compiled them into a text called the Analects, which would go on to become one of the most influential books in all of human history.
But, having a brilliant blueprint for society is one thing. Getting powerful people to actually listen to you and use it, that's a whole other story. And for Confucius, this would become the struggle of his life.
And make no mistake, he wasn't just some armchair philosopher. He got his hands dirty. He went into politics in his home state of Lung and worked his way up to a high-ranking position. He actually tried to implement his reforms, to shift power back to the Duke and away from these corrupt aristocratic families. But his plan failed spectacularly. He made powerful enemies and was forced to flee, spending over a decade in exile.
You can really see the dramatic arc of his political life. A quick rise, a really bold attempt to fix things, and then a total failure that sent him wandering for 13 years. He went from state to state, trying to find just one ruler who had listened to his ideas. The thing is, by almost any measure, in his own lifetime, Confucius was not a success. But this is where the story takes this unbelievable turn. The man might have failed, but his ideas? Well, they were just getting started. They were about to have a legacy he couldn't possibly have imagined.
Now, in the short term, his philosophy lost out to a much tougher rival called legalism. While Confucianism said a ruler should lead by moral example, legalism's view was that people are basically selfish and can only be controlled by super strict laws and harsh punishments, and it was the legalist state of Qin that ended up unifying China.
But that harsh Qin dynasty didn't last very long. The next dynasty, the Han, knew they needed a more sustainable way to govern, and in 140 BC, they made a history-changing decision. They made Confucianism the official state ideology. All of a sudden, the ideas of a man who died thinking he failed became the very foundation of the Chinese government, its education system, and its entire social fabric for the next 2,000 years, spreading all across East Asia.
His influence became just enormous. But it wasn't always celebrated. During the Cultural Revolution in the 20th century, he was actually attacked as a symbol of an old, feudal past. His grave was even desecrated. And yet, through all of it, through both reverence and revolution, his ideas have somehow managed to endure.
Which really brings us back to today. In a world that's still struggling with conflict, with political division, with fundamental questions about right and wrong, his core concerns feel so surprisingly modern. So I'll leave you with this question. 2,500 years later, what can we still learn from Master Kong about how to build a better, more humane society?